Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Silvervale, there lived a beautiful princess named Aurora. She was known far and wide for her kindness, intelligence, and the sparkle in her eyes that matched the stars in the night sky. She was the pride of her people. They adored her because she was not only respectful and charming, her intelligence and gifted hands brought joy and prosperity to her people. Due to this, people from other kingdoms wanted her for themselves. Lots of suitors presented themselves for her hand in marriage, but she always turned them down because she wasn't ready for marriage. She wanted to acquire more knowledge first and enjoy her youthful years before marriage. On the night of her 20th birthday, everyone was having fun. Her father, the king, had hosted a grand ball celebrating her birthday. Everyone who was anyone in all the lands were invited. Princes, princesses, kings and queens, and really wealthy people were present at the birthday. The party was a huge success as everyone was having the time of their life. Soon, it was time for the princess to present herself. But she was nowhere to be found. Guards were sent to look for her, but all such was to no avail. And soon, everyone was worried. The party ended abruptly as the king was in a state of panic. The whole kingdom was worried. Where was their princess? Did she run away? But why would she run away? Was she kidnapped? No one seemed to have an answer to any of these questions. All search for the princess was in vain, as she had disappeared without a trace. The king invited all the powerful sorcerers to help him figure out where his daughter was, but no one could figure out where the princess was, and soon the king's health started deteriorating. A month passed since the princess went missing and still not traced. Everyone was already feeling the impact of the princess's absence. In a kingdom far away from Silvervale, Uchichi was about to go to the stream that morning. She decided to take a route which wasn't her usual route. She wanted a change of scenery. She hummed her favorite tune as she walked through the park. Suddenly, she heard a faint moan sound. She stopped to listen, trying to figure out if it was just her imagination. She stood there for a minute, waiting to hear the sound again, but she heard nothing, so she assumed it was her imagination. As she was about leaving, she heard the voice again. Realizing it wasn't her imagination, Uchechi ran to the source of the noise, only to discover a woman in tattered clothing, laying on the ground, helpless. "Who are you? Where are you coming from? What happened to you?" Uchechi seemed to have a lot of questions for the lady, but seeing that the lady couldn't answer any because obviously she was almost unconscious, Uchechi decided that the stream could wait. She hurriedly took the girl home. Uchechi lived with her grandmother, as she had lost both of her parents to a deadly disease. She laid the lady on the bed. The lady was covered in mud and her hair was tied with a piece of cloth. After some time, Uchechi's grandmother came back to find the strange lady sleeping on their bed. "Uchechi, who is this?" she asked with a worried look on her face. "I found her on the way to the stream this morning. She was laying on the floor helpless," Uchechi replied. Uchechi's grandmother took pity on the lady and decided to help her. She helped the lady up to go take a shower, and after showering, they were shocked to see how beautiful the lady was. She had a long, flowing ginger hair, and the lady was just as young as Uchechi. The lady was Princess Aurora, but where did she come from, and what happened to the princess? In Silvervale, there was no rule that said that a male child could only inherit the throne. The female child, too, can also inherit the throne. Aurora was the only child of her parents. Her mom died while giving birth to her. Being the only child, she was to inherit the throne when her father dies. But there was someone who wasn't satisfied with this, the king's younger brother. He didn't like the idea of Aurora being queen. He himself had 5 boys, and so he believed one of them should be king instead. And so he decided that he was going to kill Aurora. And if he does that, the throne would come to his eldest son. He brainwashed some of the palace servants, and soon he was able to convince them to help carry out his evil plan. On the night of Aurora's birthday, one of the servants drugged Aurora's water, and they secretly and carefully carried her out of the palace. They carried her very far into the forest where they planned to kill her. When they arrived at their destination and was about killing her, they started having double minds because Aurora had been a nice princess and had positively impacted the lives of everyone around her, including them. And so they decided not to kill her, but to leave her there instead. Weeks passed and Aurora was so much better. She had told Uchechi and her grandmother everything and who she was. She couldn't really remember how she got to the forest, but she could remember waking up and finding herself in the forest, and she had been walking for days until she found Uchechi, and so they promised to help her get back to her kingdom. One day, a great sorceress who had journeyed through 5 kingdoms arrived at Silverville. She wanted to check the king's health. She was called for by the king's best friend, who was also his advisor. But, unknowingly to them, the king's brother had also gone to meet her to help him cover his tracks when he was about kidnapping the princess. But he had lied to her about what he wanted to do, and when the sorceress later found out, he was long gone. She decided that whenever she sets her eyes on him, she would expose him because she didn't know where he came from at that moment. When she entered the palace, the first person who she saw standing beside the king was the king's brother. And immediately he saw her, he started sweating. She didn't need to check the king's body to know that he was the one behind the sickness. She told the king that his sickness was partially from his brother and was also because he was missing his daughter. But it was mostly his brother poisoning him. The brother opened his mouth to say something, probably defend himself, but the king ordered him to keep quiet. She also told him that the reason behind the king's daughter's disappearance was the brother. The king's brother laughed. "Everyone knows she's dead," he said. The king looked at him. "Nobody says she's dead. How do you know that she's dead?" The king replied. "Well, it's been months, Your Highness. Obviously, she's dead." The king looked at the sorceress and signaled for her to continue. "Your daughter is not dead, Your Majesty. As a matter of fact, she is in the kingdom as we speak, and on her way to you. Your brother had tried to kill her, but he failed." The king's brother shouted in anger, "What do you mean by this nonsense? Guards, seize this woman." While the guards were about to arrest her, she waved her hands, and suddenly, a couple of guards who were involved started to confess. And while they were confessing, the princess walked in with Uchechi and her grandmother. The king was so happy he ordered his guards to arrest his brother and the other guards to arrest the accomplices, and they were thrown into the dungeons. The king celebrated the return of his daughter, and once again, everything went back to normal. The end.